I think that people think of ministry as always having to be something spiritual.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Anything that you are doing for God is spiritual. Literally, there are ways to show love to people everywhere you go if you're just open to it.
Hey friends, welcome to Talk It Out. Today you're going to love this because we're going to talk about your talents, all the wonderful things that you have to offer, and some great ways to use them. So this is where we talk about the practical things of life, God's Word, applying it to our life, and we do it with all of our girlfriends together, some of our male friends that like to sneak in, and you're very welcome too. We've got Joyce, we've got Aaron, and I feel very far apart from you guys today.
You're so far away.
Reach me.
I don't know if I can stand it.
But we have a special guest who's going to be coming in a little bit. She's going to share one of the ideas of what we're talking about, of how we can use our talents to make a difference around the world. Before we do that, let's talk about something really important. It's fall.
Oh, love it.
Fall is my very favorite. It makes me so happy. It's so beautiful. The weather's great. But then there's pumpkin spice. And so many people are into pumpkin spice. Are you pumpkin spice people?
Pro pumpkin spice.
You're pro pumpkin spice. Oh, all things pumpkin spice.
Candles, food.
Because
drinks.
there's everything now. I mean, you can get pumpkin spice toothpaste probably. You can get anything.
That's disgusting. But you can get pumpkin spice whipped cream and pumpkin spice creamer for your coffee.
Yeah.
Wow.
How about you, Joyce?
I was totally unaware of any of that.
This is a life-changing day.
I must not live on the planet.
Well, I'm going to bring you a basket of pumpkin spice.
Okay.
Your world.
I like pumpkin, and I do like that smell on candles.
Point to this is we're all very different.
Oh.
Yeah.
We like different things, but we all have gifts and talents and different ways that we can serve God. And I think sometimes we think, if I'm not Joyce Meyer, if I'm not just like Aaron, I don't have anything to give. I don't know how to serve the Lord. And so I think it's a great conversation to talk about the things that God has put in each one of us that can come out in very, very different ways.
Right.
But they can all be used for God's kingdom in beautiful ways. Do you guys, well, Joyce, it's hard to even talk to you about this because...
Well, thank you.
Because your call was just so evident. I mean, God made it so plain in your life. You knew what your gifting was, and you had a direct path, which is awesome. A lot of people don't have that way. So let me look at Aaron.
Thank you. Mine's been less direct. So.
Well, now, wait a minute. I want to say something about what you said.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Yes.
See, the thing that God has taught me is my teaching and preaching and writing. That's my ministry. But I have to, in my personal life, I need to serve in normal ways, just like I would tell somebody else to serve.
Yeah.
I don't just get to preach it to everybody else. I have to live it and do it.
Oh, see, I'm really glad you said that.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
I think that's an interesting point. I hope we talk about this because...
I think we can if you want to, because you're doing it right now.
Okay, great. Let's talk about this.
I think somebody had some too much spice already today.
The idea of, when I was thinking through this, how your career and like maybe your professional calling is different from our calling for what we do for the Lord and our service to Him. And how do those two intersect? Because I think as Christians and in the church, we talk a lot about like, what's my purpose? What's my calling? I was curious from your perspective, is that the same thing as what we're called to just as Christians? We are all called to serve God in some capacity, and we're all called to love people. And I just think sometimes we might get those things confused.
Well, first of all, I think that people think of ministry as always having to be something spiritual.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Anything that you're doing for God is spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's something that wouldn't ordinarily be considered spiritual. Mm-hmm. It's I mean, if you're going to the grocery store and you're doing it for God, and you go in there with the purpose of being a blessing to people and encouraging people, and who knows, God might tell you to pay for somebody's groceries, or he might have you let somebody with 2 items go ahead of you, that's got a full cart. I mean, literally, there are ways to show love to people everywhere you go if you're just open to it. And so that trip to the grocery store can become a ministry for God.
Yeah.
And so this ordinary thing becomes a holy, anointed, special thing, and people don't see that. They don't think that that qualifies because you're not on a pulpit, or you're not behind a microphone, or
I like the thought of that.
I do too.
So what we want to do right now is see what the Bible says about how we use our talents and our gifts, and why it matters so much. So here's Joyce talking about that a little bit.
Now, fruitfulness means fertile, or the quality of being prolific at producing many young. In other words, we need to be prolific at producing good things out of our life. Fruitless, of no advantage or good effect, vain, idle, useless, and unprofitable. Now, you're probably familiar with the parable of talents. How many of you are familiar with parable of the talents? In Matthew chapter 25, where the owner of the vineyard goes away and he leaves several of his servants with a certain amount of money and expected them to invest it and use it. Then when he came back, to give him more than what he had left him with. And I'm not going to turn to the story and tell the whole thing, but the first one invested his, got some back. Second one did the same thing. Third one did the same thing. The fourth one was afraid, and he hid his in the ground. So when the master came back, the first 3 he talked to, he did a good job. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. And he didn't give all of them the same amount. He gave them according to what they could handle. So God doesn't expect the same thing out of all of us. We're not all called to write 120 books. We're not all called to do the same thing. We're not all called to be able to sing like Phil does. But whatever we can do, it's a gift that God put in us, and he put it in us for somebody else. Are you there? So, for me to sit out there and be jealous of somebody up here that can sing real good is so ridiculous, because God didn't give them the gift for their benefit. He put the gift in them so you could be blessed. I tell people, God gave me a gift to speak. All it causes me to do is work. It's for you. It's not for me. Now, I enjoy what I'm doing, but I get the work part and you get to go enjoy it, you know? You don't have to be in the back room singing notes and practicing music and doing exercises with your voice every day. There's work to what people do. And so God gives us a little something, what we can handle, and he expects to get back more than what he gave, because he is a God of multiplication. And to the last guy who said, well, I was afraid and I hid what you gave me, but now here I can give you back what you gave me. God called him a wicked, lazy, idle servant. And he said, take it away from him and give it to the one who has the most. And so it's very simple. You use it or you lose it. In God's economy, if you don't use what God's given you, then he will get somebody else to do what you have the opportunity to do. Every one of you are in ministry. I now announce to you that every one of you are ordained. If you're a believer, you are ordained for ministry. Amen.
So a lot of people right now love the idea of that, love the enthusiasm of the possibilities.
Yeah.
But their first question is, I don't do those things. You know, I'm not a preacher. I'm not a singer. I don't go to the grocery, whatever it may be. But we do have a lot of excuses, I think, and maybe they're not excuses as much as sometimes they're fears or insecurities that we think there's nothing in me that I have to offer.
Well, part of that's just having a poor self-image. You know, you need to see yourself the way Christ sees you and not the way you've always seen yourself or the way other people have said that you are. But Jesus said, the greatest among you is the servant of all. Well, what comes to our mind when we hear the word servant? I don't want to be just a servant. You know, I want to do something great.
Yeah, like it's a low place.
But Jesus said that is the greatest thing.
Yeah.
And here's what the definition says that I had and just took my finger out of it where it was. Now I got to find it again. Servant presents this is from the Greek, presents the idea of subjection without bondage. If I am your servant, I can submit to you without feeling that I've lost my freedom.
That's interesting. Well, I've never heard it that way.
No, I haven't either.
That's what I say. Is that all I can get out of either one of you? Huh?
Yeah. Look at that. No, that's a deep thought.
I know two people that when I ask them to say something, their answer is my pleasure. And that just sounds so good.
Yeah.
You know, not just okay or
That's why people go to Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, treat you nice.
They don't just say okay, yeah, yeah, you know, whatever. It's just my pleasure. And I just think that is so attractive. You know, it actually makes you sound like the person really feels blessed in doing it. And God actually wants us to feel that way. We have to get over the idea of thinking that being a servant means you're going to scrub somebody's floor. That doesn't, that's not the connotation. Anytime when I'm preaching, I'm serving you. You know, we're serving people today by putting together this program for them. So servanthood can be anything from being friendly to giving somebody a ride to cooking a meal or praying. I love the people that pray for me. I mean, I don't know where I would be if people didn't pray for me on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And so there's no excuse for anybody to think, well, I just don't have any gifts. I can't do anything.
So how do we find our thing? How do we find our thing?
What do you like?
For Jesus. Okay.
What do you like?
Yeah.
I like to cook. Good. Well, cook.
She's not talking about us.
No.
No.
We are definitely not part of this.
cooking. You say, I like to cook. Well, then find somebody who doesn't like to cook but likes to eat.
Now she's talking about us.
Yeah,
Now
that's
she's,
us.
yeah. And,
No, that's great. That's true.
Very practical.
I mean, there's people that I tell a story about a woman came to a pastor and said she was depressed and wanted to get a counseling appointment. So he gave her one for about 2 weeks away. He said, but there's something I want you to do in the meantime. He said, you know those good chocolate chip cookies you make that I love? She said, yeah. He said, I want you to make as many of them as you can and just give them to people. Well, she never came back for a counseling appointment, and next time he saw her, he said, you never showed up for your appointment. She said, oh, after I started doing those cookies, I got so happy I wasn't depressed anymore.
Oh, wow.
And so
Yeah. That was her thing.
she baked cookies. And everybody has something.
Yeah.
Everybody has something that they can do that makes somebody else happy, that puts a smile on somebody else's face. I mean, even like just being really friendly. Like when we go out to eat, my husband always is very friendly with the waiters and the waitresses. Sometimes it annoys me because I'm hungry and I want to eat, and he's getting their life story, which I'm wrong. He's right. But he always shows an interest in them. How long have you been here? You know, whatever it is. And, you know, that may be somebody that nobody ever shows them any personal interest. They just, you're my waiter, wait on me, and grouch about everything they do, and you're not fast enough, and this and that and something else. And then here's somebody that just wants to know how I am. How do I like my job? How long have I been here? You know, a few things like that. So being friendly can be a gift. Not being nosy, but being friendly.
Yeah.
And everybody has gifts. It's not just the 9 gifts of the Spirit that are listed in Corinthians. There's gifts of organization. You know, I know a lot of people would probably love it if some organized person would come and organize their life. You know,
And that might help them serve the Lord in their
might
own
help
way.
them. Like I have people that do that for me. You know, I mean, I'm not a disorganized person, but I don't have time anymore to do some of the things that I used to do. And God's provided people that help do those things for me.
I had a friend who came over a couple weeks ago, and she organized my kitchen and the pantry. And I said, you don't have to do this. I mean, I hate it, but you don't have to. And she said, I love doing this. It's so fun to me. So I said, absolutely. You want to come back in a month? But it was, you're exactly right. Like it brought her joy, brought me joy too. But
I asked my executive assistant, what do you do when you have free time? She says, I organize my drawers. I said, that's what you do for entertainment? She said, oh, I love it. I just love it.
I love
to
that.
get in there and organize. And I do it when I have to. You know, so it's not something I can't do, but I wouldn't call it my top thing. But I think when people want to know what am I called to do, first thing to do is ask yourself, what do I like? What do I enjoy? What am I good at?
Yeah.
What do I like? What do I enjoy? What am I good at? God is not going to call you to do something you hate. That's not.
Do you think that's true?
Yes.
Like I wonder about Jonah, or, you know, he didn't want to go.
Well, that was Jonah's problem, not God's. I mean, I said God is not going to call you to anything that you hate. I mean. Man, you are a live wire today.
I hear what you're saying, and I wonder sometimes if
There are times God calls you to something. Maybe it's that you don't want to do is different than.
Yeah.
Well, Jonah needed.
I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Jonah
I
needed
just
to
hear you.
change.
Okay.
He needed
That's
to change.
fair.
And maybe God had to put him in a situation where he was going to either change or get dealt with. And I would say getting swallowed by a whale is getting dealt with.
He got dealt with.
And
Yeah. I've had to do stuff in life that I know I was called to do, and it was serving other people. And I knew I was supposed to be doing it, but I did not like it. But I also knew I was supposed to do it. So I also wonder, like, does he sometimes just use it as a training ground?
Yes.
Because I needed to learn those lessons in that season that I hated.
he uses those things to test you, to test your obedience, to test your faithfulness. And that probably wasn't something you were called to for life.
No, thank goodness.
Oh, okay, yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So he's not going to call us to do something for my long term that I am miserable in.
That you're just,
Yeah.
hating every day of doing.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does. Because, you know, you hear that a lot often. If you're in a job that you hate, that God wouldn't call you to do something you hate. But then what about, like, sometimes you have to provide for your family, and that's just where you have to work.
Well, there's all different kinds of ways that you can look at things like that. I don't believe that God would call you to work at something that you hate all your life, but you might have to be there for a season, you know, like you said, to provide for your family. But, I mean, I work hard at what I'm doing, and thank God I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't imagine working that hard. I mean, a passion for something is what motivates you and drives you to do it. And it's what enables you to do it maybe a long time after other people would have
Right.
given up.
And there may be a
quit.
sacrifice in it.
Yeah, there's sacrifice in it.
We do have to sacrifice for what God asks of us often.
Absolutely.
And it's not always easier. I think that's a mistake that people make. It's going to go perfectly because I know God's called me to this. It doesn't always work that way either.
Yeah.
I think there's
But
a
you're not
lot
alone
of
in
people
it.
that are they're just, I think there's probably more people just called into the helps ministry than all the rest of them put together. I mean, like I have a sister-in-law, and she just helps people. She just helps all kinds of people. A lot of times she'll help elderly people. She bakes for people. She just,
Yeah, that's great.
she just, wherever there's a need, she'll meet it if she can. And so I think a lot of the things that get overlooked are just the simple, quiet, but very beautiful things to God that maybe don't get a lot of hand claps or get your name in the paper, but
Yeah.
they get your name in heaven.
I remember one thing like that when you say God won't call you to something you don't like, when Taylor, our firstborn, was 2 years old, I realized that 2-year-old kids, they just have they're just like little sponges. I mean, you can tell them about the Lord, and they love it. And we didn't have a 2-year-old, 2 and 3-year-old class at church. And I knew that God was telling me I've got to teach the 2 and 3-year-olds at church. Well, I did not think I liked that. I did not want to do that. But I saw that great potential.
You met a need.
In those kids, exactly. And in doing what I thought I wouldn't like, God showed me that I loved it. I mean, I didn't want to do it forever. Let's be really clear. This is not my lifelong calling. I'm not doing it today. But for that time, it was what I needed to do. It met a need, and it met a need in me at the same time. So there are seasons for the things that God asks us to do.
Yeah, certainly. I'm glad you kind of clarified this, because I don't want people to think that God will never ask you to do something that you don't want to do. But I don't think he's going to have you teaching 2 and 3-year-olds the rest of your life, because that's really not your gifting. I mean, you're probably good at it then, but, that's not your...
No, that's definitely fair to say.
But when I first got really serious about the Lord and really wanted to start serving him, to be honest, I tried everything. I mean, I didn't care what it was as long as it had something to do with God. And I tried working in the nursery, and it didn't take very long for me to find out that wasn't for me. I tried street ministry, found out that wasn't for me. Sometimes you just have to try some things, and you got to do a few things until it's kind of like going out to find the outfit for the party. You try on one until you hit the right one. And
you can't always tell on the hanger until you put it on.
One thing is for sure, as long as what you do is being done out of love, it's a good thing.
I want to ask, going back to what you said about the helps ministry, because I wonder if some of the things that we can do to serve people isn't even an option for us to say that that's my calling or not. Like, if I am able to, and I have the resources to help somebody where I see a need, whether or not that's my call and purpose in life, shouldn't I just do it?
Yes, yeah. You don't have to have a call from God. I always say you don't have to have 2 angels appear to you and 4 prophecies to go do something. A long time ago, when I first started wanting to give even beyond my tithe at that point, I wanted to, but I didn't want to give up my money. And I felt like God wanted me to give somebody $10. And I was like, okay, God, if this is really you, I mean, I wanted all this confirmation. If this is really you. And I remember the Lord said, even if it's not really me, I won't get mad at you if you give somebody $10. And so it's kind of like what you're talking about. It's like I don't have to have a special word from God to help a little lady with her groceries, getting them to her car, if I can see that there's a need. Now, God, are you calling me to help her put those groceries away or not?
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine how much different the world would be if everybody would just be kind to one another? Kindness isn't a special calling from God. It's what you do as a Christian.
Yeah.
Here's a verse I love. It's 1 Peter chapter 4, beginning with verse 8. It says, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. That's good for all of us,
It is.
right?
Yeah, right.
Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Without grumbling. Yeah, that's important. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do it as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do it with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great example of all the different things. You know, I can speak. And I can serve, and all of these different things. I can offer hospitality, and I need to try to do it without grumbling more often sometimes, But these are just ways that are examples. And so when people are asking, okay, I don't know yet maybe what my thing is, start, like you said, start trying these things, start doing these things, and see what happens.
And just when a need is in front of you, ask yourself, can I meet that need?
Yeah.
I was praying for somebody. One time they had a need, and I was praying for God to meet that need. And he said, will you stop asking me to do things that you could easily do and just don't want to?
Yeah.
And how many times, I remember hearing a story here at the Ministries, it's been years ago, but somebody said, so-and-so has been here a year now. I guess they moved from out of town. And they're still sleeping on a mattress on their floor because they don't have a bed. And we're praying for God to give her a bed. And I thought, now how hard would it be for 5 of you to get together and pool your money and buy that girl a
Make
bed?
it happen.
So I think we won't run out of ways to serve God if we just open our eyes and our ears and pay attention to what's going on around us. I mean, you hear people all the time tell you what they need.
That's so very true. And that leads us right into a guest that we want to introduce you to, because she saw a need. It became heavier and heavier on her heart until she knew she needed to do something. So before she comes on, we want to ask this: are you a sheep or a goat? Let's let Joyce explain, and then we'll meet our guest.
All right, Colossians 3:23 and 24. Knowing with all certainty that it is from the Lord and not from men that you will receive the inheritance, which is your real reward. So when anything we do, if our heart attitude is, God, I'm doing this unto you, then God will reward you. I want you to get that. God will reward you. The one whom you are actually serving is the Lord Christ, the Messiah. Matthew chapter 25, and we're going to begin in verse 32. All nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them, the people, from one another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. So we see that at the end of time, there's going to be 2 classes of people, sheep and goats. Now, sheep and goats have totally different personalities. They have totally different temperaments. Sheep need to be led, and they're pretty easily led. And they make this little sound that's kind of sweet. Bah, bah. The way I sound when Dave asks me to do something I don't want to do. Bah. Yes, honey. But goats, they're always butting up against something. They're always banging their head against a wall and bucking up against something. And so goats say, but. And so we have sheep people and goat people. And sheep people are easily led to do what God wants them to do, but goat people always have an excuse and a reason why they can't and are not going to do what they should be doing. And especially when this is applied to helping other people. We all love to be helped, and we all love to have somebody do something for us, but we're here to serve. I said we're here to serve. And, we can either spend our life getting what we can get from people, or we can make a complete turnaround today and we can start seeing what all we can do for other people, and then we can find out what God can do for us. I don't want to be satisfied with just what I can get from a person. I want to find out what God can do, because he's able to do exceedingly, abundantly, above and beyond all that we could ever dare to hope, ask, or think. Sadly, many people miss the rewards of God because they're always only looking at what people can do for them. Forget about what somebody can do for you and set your mind on what you can do for somebody else. And trust me, if you start asking God and praying, what can I do for somebody else? It will not take him very long to show you. Thus, why we probably don't pray the prayer more often.
I think that's such a good point, is there are so many excuses, so many reasons that we can give why we don't do things. And we miss so many blessings because we let the excuses win out.
One of the biggest excuses today is, I'm busy.
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
All the time.
I'm busy.
Yeah.
I'm just busy.
Well, Kelly Bridges, welcome, Kelly.
Thank you.
So nice to have you
It's great
here.
to be here. Thank you.
So before 2020, let's say,
Yeah.
you definitely could have said, I'm really busy. You had 4 kids.
Yes.
You and your husband, Jamie, very busy people, leading a church, everything going on.
Yep.
But God began to put a need on your heart.
Yeah.
And actually, he had been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. And talking to you about stepping into this. Tell us what that need was and kind of how that burden began for you.
Yeah. Well, it would be stepping into the world of foster care, which at the time we had 4 children, my youngest being 11, the oldest being 18. So it's like that sweet spot in life, right, where I can leave my kids at home and go do what I want to do. And prior to that, probably as a young girl, really is when that desire got birthed in my heart to adopt one day, not necessarily foster care. I think when I was young, foster care probably wasn't really talked about as much as it would have been like just adopting internationally, or we still had orphanages in our country at that time, which we don't have that anymore. But God really birthed that in my heart as a young teenager. Now, I don't think he really did with my husband, but that's fine. That's fine. And so approaching that 2020, I had heard of a ministry that takes kids in care and will give them 1 week of camp for free. And I looked at my husband, this was probably 2016. I was like, we are going to do that. We're definitely going to do that. And so in 2017, we trained to do that. In 2018, we launched our first camp. Well, then you sit in that position where I can't really ask people to serve and do things that I'm not willing to do myself. And so it really then kind of transitioned into, well, we're going to have to walk, not going to have to, God is calling us to walk into the role of actively fostering children, not just taking kids to camp for 1 week of the year and then saying bye, see you later to them. So that's really kind of how it came about.
Talk about a sacrifice. I mean, that is a big decision to make as a family. Yes. What were some of the barriers that you had to work through?
Fear.
Yeah.
Number one, which I think that's probably a lot for everyone. Fear, anything that God asks you to do. People say a lot, which I kind of agree with. Like, if he's asking you to do it and you're not afraid, like, is it really God? Like, I mean, there are things like that, like helping someone with the groceries or like giving $10. No one's afraid of doing that. But like the big things that are going to make an impact in the world around you are a little scary.
Yeah.
So just how it's going to change our dynamic in our household. What if, there's so many different fears to walk through when you're going to step into fostering children. So that would be the biggest one.
Well, I just want to say I think that's one of the greatest things that people can do.
It is.
We spent some time here with our staff just encouraging people. We actually had somebody come in from outside and who actively tries to get foster parents, and just, it's amazing. I read that if one family out of each church in America would adopt one child, one family, that you could completely clear out the foster care system.
Yeah.
And it's that's certainly being unselfish, and I commend you for doing that. And I think it's tough for kids when they grow up in the foster care system, and so many of them end up in trouble later on. And, love is pretty easy to give away when you really make your mind up you're going to do it.
Yeah.
It's one of those resources that God multiplies when we begin to offer little bits of it. Like we were talking about with the talents, is I'm sure you walked through some really hard times.
Oh, I'm sure there's
Really
many,
hard
many
times.
challenges.
Really hard times.
And it was 2020 on top of it.
What a great time
Yeah.
to start
It
something.
was fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's start with what you said about a family agreeing on a decision like this. Like you and Jamie had to come to the place.
Agreeing and pooling are two different things, but yeah.
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 So that was just God working and making all of that come together eventually, correct?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And there's something too, I feel
Your
like
kids as well.
a lot of times we can get caught up in like we're not called to do it together,
Yeah.
which is right and wrong, right? So my husband is called to do things that I am not called to do, and I am called to do things that he is not called to do. Obviously, fostering was bringing something into our home, so we both needed to be on board with it. I felt the calling strong, but he's going to have to walk beside me as a partner in that. And now he would say he felt called to, but it was a little kicking and screaming involved, but that's fine.
I think it's interesting because sometimes we can use it as an excuse too. So
Totally.
Yeah.
it's we just can't help with that because we don't both
Both
feel
feel called.
called to do it.
Yeah.
So we better not help you, but
Yeah.
I'll pray for you. But I know I can use that easily as an excuse because I'd rather just not touch it. It's too messy. It's too hard. It's too whatever. So if I check my own motives, it probably is a lot of that.
Yeah.
And then there's wisdom. I mean, you guys had to use wisdom too because you're bringing kids into your house and it is your marriage that is impacted and your family. So there's wisdom too. But I would like to ask my own self to be really honest about why I would say no to some things
Yeah.
that maybe
And
God's
some
asking.
people in a situation like this, it wouldn't be something they would be able to do.
Sure.
It just would not be something
Yeah, not everyone's
True.
that they could
supposed
do,
to do it.
I mean, like me
Yes.
trying to work in
Very
the
much
nursery.
so.
I mean,
Yeah.
the kids I wasn't happy, neither were the kids. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anybody who even slightly has the slightest thought that might be something God would want them to do, I really urge them to take the next steps and start looking into it, because after we had the people here at the ministry, we had some people that decided to do some fostering and to do some other things. There's other things you can do. There's needs that they have.
I think that's one of the greatest things in foster care is that everyone can do something.
Right.
Not everyone has the capacity to bring children into their home.
Right.
Not everyone should bring children into their home. So if you can do that, that's great, and step out and don't be afraid. But there's many other ways to
Right.
serve fostering families.
Right.
That takes a lot. It takes a village. Like that is a true statement,
Right.
especially when it comes to kids in care. It takes a village to minister to those families that have said yes and stepped into that. So
And so here you have a great example of what we're talking about today. Okay. In many ways, you might say that the foster care system is like a hidden issue. It's not something that you even hear that much about, Oh, you grew up in the foster care system and nobody even realizes what that's like. But probably every church, once in a while, should encourage people to at least think about it, pray about it. Because sometimes people just don't think about it because it's not something that's,
Yeah,
right here.
Absolutely.
And knowing what I know now about it, if I was younger and still raising children, I would very seriously think about bringing a child into our home. And it just might not be that hard to make room for one more child. So I think it's at least something that people could think about.
One thing because I go to Kelly's church, and so I've never told you this, but it has been really amazing to watch over the past 4 years as you and Jamie have decided that this is what we are going to stand for as a church. We're going to stand up for people who are not seen or heard. To watch you guys stand for that, what a domino effect that creates. There's a multiplication that happens when you stand up for those who are not heard, and you serve, and you work for the kingdom, and you put people first, multiplication happens, because then people say, oh, I could probably do that, or I can't take a kid, but I can send a couple kids to camp for the summer, or I can be respite care for them. And to watch a body of Christ come together and it multiply, it's just, I mean, that impacts generations.
Yeah.
And all because a couple people said yes.
Yeah.
So what else can we say yes to and impact generations to come?
Right.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm sure that once you answered that call of God and you were all on the same page, everything went perfectly.
Oh, perfect.
Also, right?
That's how life works.
Still,
Totally no problem at all after
almost
that.
5 years later, still, it's just perfect. No, we had some really rough days because you do think it sounds easy to bring a kid in to your home because I love kids. So I'm like, what's another kid? We have 4. You know, like once you get past 3, you might as well have 12. Like, what's a couple more? But it was a lot more challenging than I anticipated it being. And I even had really good friends that say, listen, mourn the life you had and move on to now this is what you have. And that mourning period took a lot longer than I thought it would.
Yeah.
And then you have...
That's that sacrifice we're talking about.
Yeah. And it's a lot. We're talking about human beings, you know, they're not puppies. So it's my heart connecting to their heart, but their heart's connecting to ours too. It's different. So you have, I mean, our girls were little, but they still had been through a lot of trauma. And so just walking through those steps, even with that, and just patiently waiting and saying, okay, God, I know you called us to do this. But the thing about God calling you to stuff, calling you to work is still work. God calling you to do things is still work. He's not promising you easy. He's just promising that he'll be there every step of the way.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
So what have some of those joys been? Because now that you've adopted 2 beautiful
Yeah,
girls.
our adoption is final. Yeah.
And how would you describe, you've talked about the hard stuff. How would you describe the payoff for the hard stuff?
Just you know how it is when you have toddlers, like you were talking about your daughter being 2, and they're so sweet, right? But they're also so difficult.
Yes.
But just those little joys of having little kids in our home again. And honestly, our next oldest is 16. So there's a 10.5-year gap there. But having the girls at home has kept us at home more. So we get date nights at home because all the other people are gone besides the little ones. So it has really been enriching for our marriage too, like during this season where we thought having little ones again was so hard. There are a lot of like good, sweet moments because of it.
Yeah.
Because we can't just go out anymore, you know?
So some of those things that you were kind of mourning.
Yes. Have paid off.
Yes. Wow.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's beautiful the way that some of those things that God puts on our heart, that our first response may be, how possibly could we do this?
Yeah.
And he makes a way, and he helps you through the hard things, and he helps other people through the process. So, you know, thank you for what you are doing, and because it's not just with 2 girls, you've impacted so many lives. Also helping other people with foster care and encouraging it, and whether it's that or it's some other gift or talent that God has put in our lives, when we say yes to him, there is that multiplying domino effect that it impacts so many other people. Joyce, what would you say to encourage people as we close this out to find that thing, whether it's a simple little thing to do every day or something big like foster care that's a life change?
Well, I actually had something on my heart that I did want to say just to end. Whatever it is that you feel like God is putting on your heart, but you're afraid you can't do it, do it afraid. Because if God put it on your heart, he will give you the grace and the strength to do it. Do yourself a favor. Look up, get on your computer, and ask to see all the scriptures that say God will strengthen me. And there are just dozens of them. God will give you the strength that you need to do what he's asking you to do, and you will be fulfilled.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of excited to see what comes out of just this conversation that we've all had.
Yeah.
Because I think there will be, I believe there will be some people who
There will be.
look into foster parenting.
Awesome.
And I believe there will be many others who look into what it is that God has put in them that they enjoy, that they could use for someone else's good. So I think there's good things coming out of this. And we're praying that for you. We're praying that there's something in your life that you don't even see coming, that God is going to pull out of you and use for your good and also to serve others for his kingdom in beautiful ways. We love you all. We're so glad that you're here with us talking it out today. And Kelly, thank you again. We appreciate
Thanks for having
it
me.
very much. And we'll see you all later. Bye-bye.
It's evil spirits we seek to appease. So we'll say bless you when you have to sneeze. We do things that are odd but don't commit us. We are just a little bit superstitious. I'ma knock on wood when you come around. You bring me bad luck and you bring the vibe down. Like a black cat that came across my path. A four-leaf clover, but you're really bad at math. It might seem like I'm a bit paranoid. Everywhere you go, I try to avoid. But I don't need your bad treat me, I mean me. Every time I see you, you clearly need a horseshoe or some kind of lucky charm. No matter what you do, you stumble into harm. I'ma knock on wood when you come around. You bring me bad luck and you bring the vibe down. Yeah, I'm superstitious about you. I'm broken there.
Conversational dynamic. Go back and down, you love to fight. So you're a bad boy, right?
Only when it's time to fight.
Only when it's time to fight. They say you walk a razor line, but you just smile like it's so fine. So you're a bad boy, right? Only when it's time to fight. They say you walk a razor line, but you just smile like it's so fine. So you're a bad boy, right?
Only when it's time to fight.
So you're a bad boy, right?
Only when it's time to fight.
Living fast, chasing the light. So you're a bad boy, right?
Only when it's time to fight.
They say you walk a razor line, but you just smile, acting so fine. So you're a bad boy, right? Only when it's time to fight. They say you walk a razor line, but you just smile, acting so fine. So you're a bad boy, right? Only when it's time to fight.
So you're a bad boy, right?
Only when it's time